joining today. My name is Brian Malott. I am the Director of Sales Experience here for Freedom Forever. Excited to be kicking off this webinar series again and introduce you guys to our Product Education Manager, Mark Lennox. Mark joins us with 15 years of experience in instructional design and adult learning, and over the last couple of years has been in the Freedom Network as a sales rep. So he's uniquely qualified to fulfill this position for us here at Freedom. He's been in your shoes. He's sat at the kitchen table. He's signed Freedom documents, and then brings a wealth of knowledge within instructional learning as well. So very excited to have him join the team. Other things that Mark will be working on is a video library. So we are going to be working on a series of quick hit videos to help guide the process. Mark, take it away.
All right. Thanks a lot, Brian. And thank you for everyone who came to this webinar today. You know, I want to echo what Brian said. I'm really excited to get this bi-weekly webinar series back up and running. We've got some great sessions planned over the next couple of weeks, but today we are talking about understanding your scope of work. And again, just that some of that bio information. I've worked in instructional design and technology for about 15 years. I was a sales rep for a couple of Freedom dealers since late 2019, but this is where I belong. I love this new role, getting back into the education side. So, really without further ado, we want to get into the meat of the session. So let's go over the agenda real quick and just kind of focus in on what we're going to be talking about today. So we have 7 main things we want to talk about today. And the first being Aurora's cost estimating feature and that convert to contract button. Then we'll spend some time on where to locate the scope of work tab in Lightspeed, the timeline of your scope of work, and the naming convention for each of those steps. Then we'll do a deeper dive on some examples of scopes of work. And as we progress towards that scope of work confirm stage, we will walk you through the process of approving or denying that scope of work. And then we'll wrap up talking about the compare tool, where you can compare a couple of versions of your scope of work and see how your cost estimates break out versus the true cost of the project. There's going to be a good chunk of time at the end for a Q&A, and Brian and Rob will jump in there and help answer some questions. And then we'll wrap up by previewing some of the upcoming webinars that we have coming down the pipeline. So first things first, let's talk about Aurora's cost estimating tool. The main thing that we want to stress here from the jump is what role Aurora's tools play in your project. So here are some of the key points that we want everyone to remember when using Aurora. So key point number 1, Aurora is an estimating tool. The options that you choose in Aurora do not transfer over to your project when you convert to contract. So when you do convert a project to a contract, it's important and really required to select the appropriate upgrades in the upgrades page on the project generator. Otherwise, they're not going to transfer over. So if you take a look at the lower left-hand side of my screen here, you're going to see the adjust system tool that's within Aurora. And you can see here, I've chosen the Freedom Forever panel as my module, and I've chosen the Enphase IQ8. If I were to leave this as is, none of that's going to transfer over to Freedom when you convert. So when you're working your way through the project generator, it's important that when you get to the system details page and it asks, are any upgrades needed, that you match the available upgrades to the product itself. So because I chose this Enphase IQ8, I need to make sure that I check the box within the project generator so that we notify Freedom that these things are part of the project. What you choose in Aurora does not impact your sold scope of work. Again, you're using this tool as an estimator in Aurora. The scope of work that Freedom creates is the cost of that job, independent of what you've chosen here in Aurora. So the scope of work that you approve or deny has the most up-to-date project costs. So before we leave this page, and again, there's going to be a lot of time for questions and answers at the end. So if you do have some questions, make sure you can drop them in the chat so we'll get to them, or write them down. So when we get to that phase, we'll answer as many questions as possible. But before we leave this spot, I want to point out and remind everyone to take advantage of the Convert to Contract button on the upper right-hand side of Aurora. Using this tool is an essential step in project generation because it captures your finance details, the key details in the lead, and it captures the design. So that way you won't have to re-enter name, address, etc. You'll still need to select the upgrades, like the checkbox on the right-hand side of the page here, but it saves time and avoids you having to do double entry. It doesn't transfer over the adders currently. It is something that we're working on in the future, but when you don't use this tool, Freedom has to get a second design. So they're paying for 2 designs when you can just convert to project here and have that design transfer over. So take advantage of this button. Again, there is no downside, only benefit. All right, so we're going to move on to the next, which is where to locate the scope of work details when you're in Lightspeed. So inside of a project, the scope of work tab, when you open up a project, you'll see snapshot, your pipeline, your project details, and I've highlighted that scope of work tab, which lies between project details and progress. When you click that scope of work tab, you'll see the key details of the project. Remember, the details that are provided here are a reflection of the current state of the scope of work. So you can tell by my example here that I'm using an example that's version 1.2, which is typically the version of the scope of work that requires you to approve or deny. That means this particular example has gone through site audit, construction review, and the account management team has completed their final audit. And also on the left side, you'll see a button for view layout. So this is a great way for you to open up your project and see how if the design matches what you did in Aurora or if there's any changes. So again, you'll see the modules, the system size, the inverter, the sold production versus the projected first year production. Any notes that you added to the project are down here. And then because this has gone through that final audit, you'll see each stage of the adders, like the dealer fee, stuff that was added that you put in project generation, like the modules, in this instance, the premium smart home package, and that Enphase IQ8 that I checked in the project details. You'll see the sold net versus the net PPW here as well. So this is where you locate the scope of work tab within Lightspeed. So what we're going to talk about next is how the scope of works are named, like the naming convention for them, and why they're named the way they're named. So we're going to take a few minutes to break this down. So you've got your sold scope of work, which is the primary data added to Lightspeed from the project generator after completing the sale. So during project generation, those adders are not going to show up. Like you are going to see the things that you checked in the upgrades box that ideally match what you've done in Aurora. Now, scope of work version 1.1. The signed contract is version 1 of that contract. So it's the initial signed contract, and then any scope of work progression will increase by decimal point. So sold of scope version 1 is the first version of the scope of work that includes the adders you selected in project generation, the modules, any dealer fees associated with your finance product, or like if you gave a rebate or promotion, they're going to show up there. When you get your scope of work version 1.2, this is the version of the scope of work that you will approve or deny. So included in the details are the project design, that little button we showed you on the last slide, as well as any additional adders that were located during that final audit stage. Like for instance, they spotted the home may need an MPU or a load or line side tab. Now, if everything is good in version 1.2 and you approve that scope of work, it's going to move to the plan stage. So remember, your adders here are what Freedom on version 1.2, your adders here are what Freedom has determined as the costs determined to complete the job. They could be vastly different from your Aurora estimate if things were found in that final audit that need to be addressed prior to install. So at that point, that pretty much covers the first 3 versions of the scope of work. If everything's going correctly in your project and you approve it and move on to the next phase. So let's say you have to deny the scope of work for something that doesn't require a contractual change. That's where SOW version 1.3 would come in. So as an example, say you get this scope of work 1.2 back and your homeowner says, you know what, I'd like to move a couple of panels from array 2 over to array 3. You can deny that scope of work, and when you do that, it's provide as much detail as possible on that deny scope of work so that the design team can fix those modules. You'll receive an updated version of that scope of work, and it will progress another decimal point to 1.3. Now, if that's the version of the scope of work that's approval, you'll approve it and you'll move on to the plan stage. If you deny the scope of work because of changes needed to the contract, like needing a change order to increase the cost, that's something you'll need to get signed. So you'll deny the scope of work and then generate that change order. Once that change order is complete and signed, you will get a new version of the SOW that starts at 2.1 because there are brand new signatures and essentially a new contract. So it's starting contract 2, scope of work 1. If there are any edits to this one, it'll be 2.1, 2.2. Any additional change orders will trigger version 3, version 4, and so on. So if your homeowner agrees to the change order to increase the finance amount, once everything is complete, you can approve that scope of work, version 2.1, and that will move it over to plans. Okay, so we kind of skimmed the surface on what each of the phases of your scope of work looks like. So let's grab a few examples in Lightspeed of what these look like from phase to phase. So again, this is an example of a sold scope of work right after project generation in Lightspeed. Remember, each version of your scope of work is a progression towards the one you'll be asked to approve. This one has some key details, but it's not your guiding light. There's work to be done on the back end in the initial account review and then the final audit after the site survey. So just to reiterate, this is a scope of work that shows up after you generate a project. And like we said on previous slides, Aurora is just a tool for estimating project costs. You'll see that under upgrades, you can see that I checked the box for that end phase system, letting Freedom know this is something that I need to get added to the adders because this is an upgrade. So we checked the box in Aurora, but we made sure to also check it here. So you can see the gross price of the system, but none of the adders have been processed. That's going to occur in the next slide, version 1.1, where we go through the initial audit phase of a scope of work. So here is version 1.1. Again, this is not the version of the scope of work that you approve or deny, but it does match up with the project information that you entered in the project generator. For instance, the module upgrade now shows up after initial account review, as well as the dealer fees and that end phase upgrade that was selected in the system details upgrade screen. This scope of work has not completed a final audit, that final audit that occurs after a construction review after the site survey. But you can see where the sold net price is and the net price. This is version 1.1, and now we're going to move over to version 1.2, the version of the scope of work that we consider kind of cooking with gas. We've made it to version 1.2, meaning that there is a design attached to the scope of work. You can see where the additional arrays are located, as well as any additional adders that may have popped up during that final audit. There was no way to know that this project needed a line or load side tap before the site survey. And we have a couple of additional roof planes that require that adder as well. So you can see at the bottom that those two adders were added in this phase and what impact it had on the net PPW. So to put this simply, at this stage, these are the costs that are needed to complete this project. Remember, the amount that you entered in Aurora is just an estimate. Now we have the true final numbers needed to move this project forward. Okay? So one of the really cool tools inside of Lightspeed is this Compare SOW tool. At the bottom of your scope of work tab, you'll see your version history. If you have 2 or more scopes of work, you can click the Compare Versions, and this will bring up 2 of the most recent versions of your scope of work. This area up here is a drop down. So if you have maybe 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and then maybe a 2.1, you can click those drop downs and choose which scope of works you want to compare. Notice that anything that's different between the scope of works has a green line on it, so you can see where the differentiation is. So let's take a look at this sold production versus the first year production and give you like an example of the production guarantee. So let's just hypothetically say we've designed this system that this sold production was 110% of the homeowner's consumption. And after that final audit, you can see that it's really close. It's as close to 100% of what your design is. So this project will meet that 110% offset because the offset is based on your target, the target that you set in Aurora. So if this is a 110% offset project, that means the PG offset is based on your design. So this project would meet what your target was when you designed it in Aurora. And you can see here that version 1.1 and 1.2 have a different net price because of these additional adders that showed up in that final audit. So that brings us to the Q&A section of that. I know that was a lot of information to process. So I'm going to bring up the chat, and I'm also going to bring Brian and Rob back in so we can answer and address any questions you have. And let's get to it. There may be a lot of questions and a lot of things that we talk about here. I just want to make a note here on this slide. If you have any feedback on this presentation, comments or ideas for future webinars, or just something that you'd like to see us present, send us an email at producteducation@freedomforever.com. So we'll respond to every email we get there. If your question, if we get too many questions and we run out of time here today, we still want to make sure that every person's question is answered. So make sure to shoot us an email. And even if you just want to comment on how this process went, that's a good way to do it. Producteducation@freedomforever.com. So Brian, Rob, let's take some questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Looks like we have one from Ricky here. Ricky, do you need us to unmute you, or are you able to unmute yourself? Let me find Ricky here.
Brian, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I got you, Rob.
We got you.
Hey, guys. Morning. Well, while you're taking a look for that, Brian, first of all, Mark, awesome job going through it.
Appreciate it.
Really good way to explain kind of the different scope of works and how everything comes to pass. You mentioned a couple of topics that I just want to reiterate and really drill home. I think you did a great job reviewing them, but they're super important. Just want to make sure a couple of points are just reiterated. Again, Mark talked about how you're using Aurora to estimate the price of your project. We had a question come in about why there aren't all of those adders that are in Aurora within the Freedom Project Generator. And I just want to speak on that real quick. The items currently listed in the Freedom Project Generator are only those items that a representative might upsell. It's not all adders. Currently, the Freedom Project Generator isn't used to price your project the way that Aurora is. So it's really not necessary to have all of the adders listed there that might be up in the field, might be adding to a project. So in other words, a main panel upgrade or re-roofing or an EV charger, things that you've discussed with the homeowner that you've basically included in your deal and the homeowner is expecting. Those are the only upgrades that are currently available in that list. Everything else, for example, line side taps, any other electrical work, roofing, structural work, all of those other adders that might be charged, those are things that Freedom will add if and only if they're necessary. There's really no reason that you as a rep would say, hey, I want a line side tap here. Like that's not something that you would upsell because there's no benefit to the homeowner there. We only do them when we need to do them. Okay. So that's an important distinction. Just want to make sure you guys know that. On that same note, we've had some confusion with certain teams in the past where they say, hey, I added, sorry for the plane overhead here, but they say, hey, I added a line side tap in Aurora, but it didn't end up on my scope of work. Again, just want to reiterate that, yes, 100%. What you did there is you basically increased the price of your project in Aurora to account for a line side tap adder. But if we didn't need a line side tap to build the job, we're not going to add that adder in the scope of work. If everything else was the same, basically that means that you charge an extra, whatever it is, $300 in this example, and you didn't have an adder for $300. So your net PPW would have been higher in that scenario. Okay, so I just want to explain that. I hope that makes sense. The second key concept that I just want to make sure is drilled home, and Mark touched on this in the version 1.1. We get a lot of questions around the sold net PPW. I really just want to drive home this point. The sold net PPW is not really a super accurate number. What I mean by that is that sold net PPW is the net PPW of the version 1.1 that is created after Freedom does our initial account review. At that time, we don't know all of the adders. So that net PPW isn't really inclusive of all of the adders on the job. And it is not, and I want to be very clear here, that net PPW is not what you did in Aurora. Okay, I'm going to say that again. The sold net PPW is not what you did in Aurora. We, at this point in time, don't know and honestly don't really care what you did in Aurora. Okay, so let me give you an example just to drive this point home. Let's say you sell a job at $3 net PPW in Aurora. You include a re-roof that's 50 cents a watt. All right, so it's $3 net with a 50 cents a watt re-roof. You then go through the project generator, you sell the re-roof, but of course, we don't know the cost of that re-roof at this point, and you didn't tell us in the project generator you included 50 cents a watt. So when we generate the version 1.1, you would basically get it, all other things being equal, you would get a sold net PPW back of $3.50, right? Because you sold it at $3, you included an extra 50 cents for the re-roof. We're going to show that there's a re-roof included, but we don't know the cost, so we don't deduct that adder from the net PPW. Okay, so your sold net PPW is going to show as $3.50, even though you really sold it in Aurora at $3. Then, after project review in the 1.2, we'll have the re-roof quote at that point, so we'll know the adder. And let's just say, for the sake of round numbers, it did come back at 50 cents. Your net PPW in the version 1.2 would then go back down to $3. So if you're comparing your sold net PPW versus your 1.2, you're going to say $3.50 versus $3. Hey, what the heck? Why did I just lose 50 cents a watt? But that's not really what happened. Okay, we just didn't have all the information at the time that we generated the sold net PPW. Okay, so just keep that in mind. I know you guys don't have all the visibility you want to have it to Aurora right now. A lot of things in the fire, a lot of improvements to help give you extra visibility and fix that.
That's great.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Or thanks, Rob. So I have a couple more hands up here. I'm going to go ahead and unmute AJ now.
Hey, I just had a question in terms of scope of work, and I was wondering why it's taking weeks to come back now as opposed to them being quicker earlier. So I have a project. It's still, the scope of work still hasn't come back, and I submitted that end of September. So I was just curious as to why they're taking weeks to come back now.
Got it. So I don't obviously have the project in front of me here. There are several reasons why, some scope of work take longer than others. If you want to follow up with us, please, escalate that to your manager, and we'll be happy to dig into that project for you and see what's going on there. I'd like to plug the Sales Concierge team here at this time. Using the chat feature within Sales Concierge is going to be a great way to get an update on that question. And then also within that chat feature, they do have some different layers within that team. So there's Sales Concierge level 1, level 2, and there's now a level 3 that can help with those very complex scope of work type questions. So I would advise you to follow up through that Sales Concierge chat platform, and then we will be able to escalate your question accordingly and get you an answer on that.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so we got a good question from the chat, and that question is, when adders are included in initial proposal and then determined not to be needed, example MPU, what is the process? Do we require a change order? Is cost automatically given to rep as added commission? So let me see if and Lucas, you can tell me if I've got this right. So when you are in the process of generating this project, you are adding an MPU, but you're not sure if it's needed. And in the event that it's not needed, do you need to do a change order to change the price, or is that just going to be included in the price throughout the project? Do I have that right? Okay. So, Brian, Rob, do you want to take this? I'm pretty sure
Sure, yeah. I'll hop in and take this one. So when you are in the upgrade section, during the project generation flow, there are 2 main panel upgrade options there. The first one is simply MPU. And if you select MPU, what that's going to do is it's going to alert the Freedom Construction Engineering team that you have basically upsold a main panel upgrade to the customer. So regardless of if one is needed or not, we will be upgrading your customer's main service panel. The other option there is an MPU if needed. And so I think that's the situation that you're referring to here, where you can let the customer know, hey, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, if you guys needed a main panel upgrade, we'll be happy to do that for you. However, if a main panel upgrade is not necessary, we'll just go ahead and keep it at your original panel here. So in the one case, the selecting MPU will go against the net PPW. We will be building that in. You'll be charged the main panel upgrade fee. However, if you choose the MPU if needed and one is not needed, then we won't need any changes to the contract. And then yes, you would then absorb that into your net PPW.
And just one piece to add there, Brian. Again, we always suggest adding, choosing the MPU if needed. Okay, we don't want to do MPUs if we don't need to. As you guys know, MPUs slow down projects; they take longer. None of us want that. So we always highly suggest using the MPU if needed. If you do choose MPU and you didn't actually upsell it to the customer, you only wanted to include it if we needed it, and you in fact changed your mind, we don't need it to build it, and you actually didn't sell it to the customer, you would need a change order in that scenario. Okay. Whereas if you chose MPU if needed and we didn't need one, as Brian mentioned, you would not need a change order. So I want to make sure that's clear. But again, going back to the example earlier, if you chose MPU if needed and we don't need an MPU, that's not going to ding you as an adder. So it's not going to reduce your net PPW. So you basically, if you included costs for that when you price the project, you would come out ahead because you wouldn't have an adder to offset to reduce the net PPW.
Sweet. Thank you for that. I just had one question. I find with the Freedom Aurora portal and the designs on Freedom, I'm getting like sometimes in certain situations I get 80, 90% offset. But if I do a different design like the old Vivint Optimus SV2, I get a higher, at least 100 or 110% offset.
Yeah, I think that speaks to, I think that's one of the whole reasons that we use Aurora is because it's accurate, right? And I know we have plenty of improvements to make in terms of, improving the tool, getting setbacks, better and shade. I know LiDAR's messed up sometimes, et cetera, but, that's why we're using Aurora. It has proven itself to be an extremely accurate design tool. And when I say accurate, there's kind of two different ways you can look at it. Number one is how accurate is what you sold relative to what we see after we look at it after site audit. But the second piece is, okay, once we have a confirmed estimated design, how accurate is that against real world conditions? And so when I say accurate, that second one is really what I'm talking about, where we say, okay, we've looked at these after a year, 2 years, and compared them to other other tools, and we find that Aurora is extremely accurate, from a confirmed model versus actual real world conditions. Other tools we find tend to overestimate production, and so the real world production, once the system actually is installed, ends up being lower than what some of those other tools estimate they would be. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, we got a quick question in the chat that I wanted to address real quick. Armando King said, can you show us the chat feature? We can jump over to that if you'd like. I will tell you that when you are in Lightspeed, there is a small chat, like a chat bubble on the lower left-hand side of the screen. And when you click that and enter your full name, and important that you enter your full name, that will take you to the queue to be in line for Sales Concierge, and it's generally a pretty quick response. We do have a video coming out about this process relatively shortly that will go over how the chat process works and, in what situations you would elevate and request a callback for some of those higher level issues.
God, it looks like Ricky echoed that one as well. So yeah, that's going to be one of the first videos that we upload into this video library here for our sales teams. So great question. Thank you. Looks like we have Andrew that's had his hand up. Andrew, you want to go ahead and ask your question? Oh,
yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Gotcha.
Yes, sir. We hear you.
Perfect. Hey, multiple 2-point question here. One is, what kind of timeline ETA should we be setting with the customer? Hey, your site inspection is this Friday. We should have the results back in X amount of time. My second question is what I've noticed, and I've been doing solar for a while. I'm new to, working with Freedom, which has been an awesome experience, by the way. However, like when I do an MPU, it seems like normally there's some additional, on average, about $500 miscellaneous that's added to that with any MPU that's done. Is that something to normally expect, or are there things that we should look at for that? Just so we can be more proactive from our end, maybe adding some miscellaneous dollar amounts, et cetera.
Got it. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for the question. I think as far as timeline is concerned, it really shouldn't go over a week. We're aiming to get that down to within about 3 days. There are some times where there's additional information needed. Maybe there's some permit research that we need to check to make sure a structure is permitted or things like that. But we really shouldn't be going more than a week after the site survey to have that scope of work for you. And then the second part of the question with regards to the electrical pricing, as you guys know, just globally, with inflation as it is, like prices have just gone through the roof, and so we've seen more more costs coming with this additional work that we have. So that's why you're seeing it show up on the scope of work here. I am working actively with our product management team and our operations leaders to evaluate how we're pricing electrical work on scope of work. And obviously, what we want to do is we want to get you as much information as we can on the front end, so that you can include that when you're pricing the job up front, which then in turn leads to fewer change orders, and you guys not having to absorb any of those costs downstream. So I've gotten a lot of feedback about this. It's one of the top things that I'm working on with the operations leaders, and so I would expect hopefully we'll see some changes to how they're listed here in the future. But yeah, that's just to give you a little peek behind the curtain of why you're seeing some of those
Sure.
charges on the scope of work.
Could we potentially just change Aurora to add 3,000 instead of 2,650 or whatever it is? I mean, it seems to be a more realistic number. And then with that being said, most of my site audits are taking about 2 to 3 weeks to get back SOW.
So let me speak to a couple of those real quick, if you don't mind, Brian. So in terms of timelines, guys, I know you guys are feeling some pain with the site audit complete to scope of work sent to sales kind of turnaround right now. September is pretty much peak sales season, right? So August is a very strong month. September is a very strong month. Summertime for us, we see a significant ramp in volume. And I know you guys are feeling the pain of turnaround times right now. And I think, just to be blunt, that's a function of capacity, right? There's just more coming through the pipeline than we have capacity for, in this peak summertime. That's a short-term problem. We've done everything we can. We've thrown additional resources at that team to increase capacity. But we've already started to see significant decreases in turnaround times. And you guys are, over the next few weeks, going to continue to see improvement. So I know peak times, it is painful. We feel the pain too. Don't disagree with what you guys are saying. But I just want you to know we're on the down slope, right? We've kind of hit the peak. We've gotten through it, and you guys are going to see improvements from this point forward through the winter time and into next spring, and doing everything we can to plan for this for next summertime, so that we don't have the same issues. But I think that's just a function of busy season. Everybody at some point kind of feels that similar pain. But again, it will get better in terms of pricing. I personally, like, when I sell a job, I always add in an extra 10, 15, 20 cents a watt, depending on the system size, just to cover me. Obviously you got to get more competitive in certain situations, and certainly understand that. But, it's never a bad idea to add some extra fluff. You can always add, there's a miscellaneous adder within Aurora. You can do a flat dollar amount, or you can do a price per watt miscellaneous adder. So if you want to go ahead and add an extra $300, $400, $500 or 10 cents a watt, 20 cents a watt, whatever it is, you can use those miscellaneous adders to do that. Personally, I think that's a really good idea, and that avoids having to go back to customers and reprice a deal, which we all know is very dangerous to do. The less you can do that, the better off you're going to be from a realization and customer experience standpoint.
Thank you so much for answering those questions. One last thing is there any way for us to go back and look at our original SOW, like what we sold things at? I have not been able to find that.
Yeah, that's a great question. We've gotten that one quite a bit. So in terms of why we've done it the way we've done it, just so you guys know, we purposefully remove access to the sold Aurora design, because we want to preserve what you sold. If we kept access to it, you guys could go in there and adjust it, and we wouldn't know like what actually was sold. So we purposely remove access, but we recognize 100% the frustration that you guys want to go and look at what was sold, and maybe you want to game out other scenarios or whatever. So we do have some things in the works to fix that. First and foremost, as it stands today, when you convert an Aurora design to a project, you're going to see the project listed in your lead at the bottom. You can duplicate that design. At this point in time, that's going to duplicate just the design itself. It's not going to duplicate the adders and the financing. It will preserve the net PPW that you sold it at, but the adders and financing don't come through. We have a ticket in with Aurora to fix that and make sure that the adders and financing come through with that duplication. But right now, you could duplicate a project to get your, basically the design that you sold with the net PPW that you sold. Then you can kind of just add the adders and financing as you want. So that's one note. I think that's super important to know. Not everybody knows that. To answer the question, how do you duplicate it? Mark, I don't know if you can pull up a lead that's been converted, but it's basically just going to see when you convert an Aurora proposal at the bottom within the lead that you started on, there's a projects section. So it's going to list that as a project. And then there's going to be a button that says duplicate proposal. So you just click that button. It's going to launch you right into Aurora. You're then going to have, that proposal that you can then edit from that point forward. So that's a helpful tip. Second thing is that we've been working through this with our product team over the past couple of weeks pretty heavily. This is a big priority for us. We're working on the data transfers from Aurora. So we are intending to add some additional information in the project when you sell it. That includes the adders that you sold, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see exactly what you sold. And we also have some other plans that we might toy around with that would basically lead to you guys continuing to have access to what you sold. So, we get the pain. We're working on some fixes there to improve visibility, as I mentioned earlier. So
and here is the duplicate proposal spot as well.
There you go. So you can duplicate it, and then once you duplicate it, you can duplicate the one you duplicated, if that makes any sense. So
right.
If you want two of them, you can just duplicate them twice, basically.
Another quick thing you can do as well, if you have something ready to go, like you want to keep a snapshot of it before you convert it. If you click on the three lines on the upper left-hand side and click View Summary, it will allow you to download a summary of that so you can keep a copy of it and see how it was broken down for yourself. It's an extra couple of steps, an extra couple of clicks until this is resolved, but it will give you kind of a breakdown of what you were, how you sold it. So in case you duplicate it, you have the information here that you can input in and tinker with it as well.
Thanks, Mark. All right, we'll throw it over to Mo, and then we'll go to Cameron after that.
Hey guys, hopefully everyone's having a nice day. Yeah, my question was, is there anything that we could do to try to avoid the trenching with the MPU, build the system under a certain size? Because I've noticed with a lot of these projects, if they have underground power lines in their neighborhood and they need an MPU, there's always trenching involved, and it's $5 to $10,000 for the trenching. If we built the system under I think it was a 6.4 is what someone told me, then we could avoid the MPU and the trenching. Do you guys know those exact the exact system size that we could build it under to avoid trenching?
So I think that's going to vary per site. Again, this is something that you can, when you get a scope of work back like that, if you have very specific questions like that, I would steer you towards the Sales Concierge chat feature. If you guys chat with them and you say, I need some live scope of work help, and game through a few of those scenarios, they're going to be able to help you run those scenarios. They have a direct line to our construction engineering team. And if there's some changes that you want to make to the project, you can say, hey, I see that we have, a main panel upgrade with some trenching is required. We'd like to do everything we can to avoid this main panel upgrade. What's my optimal system size that we can do without triggering that main panel upgrade? That's something that the Sales Concierge team will be able to help you out with in conjunction with our construction engineering team and get you that answer. So one of the future webinars that we're going to do as well is about Sales Concierge. So I'm going to be happy to have one of our subject matter experts from the Sales Concierge team come on, give you a little update on Sales Concierge, best practices with helping their team. And so, yeah, we'll be happy to do a follow-up, one of these webinars with that team as well, and go over these scenarios. Great question.
Okay, we've got Cameron Macbeth with his hand up. I'm going to ask him to unmute.
Hey guys, thanks so much for taking the time and covering a lot of this stuff. I think it's really good for people that are a little bit newer. I've seen a lot of scope of works, and the process has improved tremendously. The one question I do have, every once in a while, it's not a common occurrence, but every once in a while, I'm really trying to max fit the roof because maybe usage is high or roof space is low, and I thought, and I could be wrong, I thought we were able to get a max fit layout at the scope of work stage. Is that after plans have been generated, or when do we normally see that? Because I've noticed that I haven't been getting it during the scope of work stage.
Rob, you want to take that one? I know we had some changes to that process here.
Yeah, I can take that one. This one might get a little bit more in the weeds than some of the other questions, but we've changed the way that our process works and kind of the interactions between site audit and our construction engineering team. I think this change probably happened, I don't know, maybe 6 to 9 months ago. And so in the old process, what we used to do when we went for a site audit is a lot of the decisions were being made by the site auditors on the roof. And so we had a process where prior to a site audit, we would generate a max fit design and basically send that out for a site auditor to confirm. And so we basically build a roof with as many panels as we thought we could fit. We try to, squeeze panels in and fit as many as we could do. And then the site auditor, their job was to measure the roof and basically confirm how many of those modules we could fit on the roof. And so they were the ones that really were the holders of the information and the measurements. And they were the ones that when we got the site audit results back in construction engineering, we would basically look at their markup and they would put red X's. No, I can't fit this mod. No, I can't fit that mod. I can add an extra mod here. And so that was really the source of truth on how many mods we could fit. It came from the site auditors, and the CE team would basically just work off that. The challenge with that is a fewfold. Number one, if you want to change a layout or you want to change a module that has a different dimension, you're basically like, that's kind of useless once you make any changes like that. So there was limited kind of editability we had to that, so to speak. And the other piece of it is that takes a lot longer on the roof. Site auditors have to take a lot more time to do that. So we changed the process such that all the site auditors are doing are basically taking some key measurements and, really just measuring the outline of the roof. They're on and off the roof a lot faster. And what we then do is we take those measurements and we plug them into Aurora, and we basically make a design from those measurements. And then that's the model that we use. We basically, using those measurements, then come up with, okay, here's how many modules that we could fit, or here's how many we want to fit. In the interest of speed and the interest of, not spending an hour on a roof and not spending 45 minutes to an hour on every construction engineering job, we basically measure the roofs and make an accurate design only for the roofs that we really need. So we basically look at what was sold, we add, a certain number of modules or a certain percentage more than that. And then once we are able to fit that number of mods, we kind of like move on. It's like, all right, we're not going to use any more of the mods than that. So we're not going to spend our time making a model when it's kind of unnecessary. And so the reason I bring this up is because that max fit process went away. We're not building max fits the way we used to, which is why you're not seeing them anymore. So I know that was super helpful for you guys. We are working through a process and a plan to build a similar version of that. I'm not going to talk through all of them, because we have a ton of really, really good ideas and really good improvements coming for Aurora that is built for you in mind. I know it's super frustrating for you guys to make changes and make change orders and layout revisions right now. And it's just not, you're kind of just like, I'm kind of taking a guess. I don't really know what I need without Freedom's help. So we're putting a ton of effort and time into improving that and making it, the concept that we're trying to get to right now is, okay, how can we make it so that you can get back to Aurora once you've sold the deal and do a layout revision or do a change order through Aurora? So you basically use Aurora, put the layout that you want, and then that, feeds the information into a change order or a layout revision. So we're working on making that happen. But in the meantime, hopefully that answers your question on why you're not seeing the max fits anymore.
All right, next I'll throw it over to Nate. Nate, you still have a question over there? You'll have to unmute yourself.
Hi guys, sorry about that, lagging a little behind here. Can you hear me?
We got
we
you.
can hear you.
Perfect. Okay. I've been dealing with Aurora and Freedom for about 2 years now, and the improvement has been huge. I'm really happy to continue working with you guys. It's not very common I run into this, but every now and again it does come up, and when it does, it's a little hard to work with. So sometimes I will have a sold scope or have a sold Aurora project converted, and we will have discussed placement of the panels based off of where Aurora is estimating, and I let them know that Freedom will might have a better plan for the offset of panels, unless of course we base it off of the specific layout that the homeowner wants. Usually the latter is the case. But for a lot of those times, when the site auditor comes, they will get really chatty about where they think things are going, even if there's not a specific PDF with or even if there is a specific PDF included where the panels are going. And once they start discussing things like that with the homeowners, they start to get confused. What can I do for project notes in the future to avoid that? Do I have to emphasize the system layout? Do I have to include it in the special request notes at the end of the proposal or project?
Got it. Great question there, Nate. Thanks. I'll take that one. So a few different things there. I'll start off by saying that site auditors are trained not to have those conversations with homeowners. So if that's occurring, please bubble that up to Hugo. Hugo and I talk very regularly, and we'll, any specific project examples, please send that over so that I can address it immediately. Those conversations should not be happening.
Got it. Thank you.
Additionally, from there, my first question is going to be, are you using that convert to contract button in the upper right-hand corner of Aurora so that when you are converting your project, that we're getting that design through? That's my first question.
Whenever possible, yes. Sometimes it glitches out and I'm not able to go through with that process, so then I'll have to create the project on its own. But 9 times out of 10, I'm able.
Okay, got it. So that's going to be the first step in getting that over to us. I always recommend putting notes there in the section where it's like, how do you make it shine? Leaving any notes there would be great. And then also there's an area where you select a sales preference. So you can either say, maximize production, or maybe the Aurora the Aurora design that you're getting is being, you think a little conservative. You think you can fit more panels there. You can click that maximize production, and then in the notes section say, customers looking for all the production they can get, please include as many panels as will fit on this roof. That's one thing you can get across to us. Or in the case where you have a customer that's very focused on aesthetics of the system, you can click match my sold layout exactly, and then you can, any additional notes that you leave for us in that free text note space would be great. Customer is adamant about not having panels on the front of the roof. Please design the layout exactly as it is in my Aurora design. And those notes are received by our construction engineering team, and they should be designing the system to your sales preference. Similar to requesting feedback, if for any of those conversations that are happening with site audit techs, if you guys have laid out clear notes of how you want the system designed, where you want the modules, and our team is not delivering on those requests, please send those examples to your management. They can escalate those to me, and I will follow up with our construction engineering leadership to make sure that notes aren't being missed and that we're paying close attention to the preferences of our sales reps.
Perfect. Okay, and then I have 2 more quick questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, shoot.
Okay, so in cases where an attic run is priced in, put into the adder sheet properly, and there's plenty of time saying that the attic run goes through. And I've only ever seen this happen once, but I'm unsure of the process. And the install completes, and there's no attic run done. How is that reprimanded? Is the homeowner refunded for the attic run? Did they go back and fix it?
So attic runs can get a little tricky. There's not always attic space where we, for homes that we're requesting attic runs on. If an attic run is priced in and it is not performed, it should not be added to the scope of work. So you guys shouldn't be charged for it. And at that point, if you want to credit it back to the customer, you can. So yeah, that's it. If you ever price in an attic run, it is not performed and it's still on the scope of work, I would advise you to reach out to the sales concierge team through the chat, let them know of the scope of work discrepancy, and then they'll work with account management to get the scope of work updated.
Perfect. Okay. And last question is, there's quite a bit of a difference between the adders that are available in Freedom for me to check off compared to Aurora. For example, we have full re-roofs available, but I only see partials done in Freedom, and it's my understanding that those partials are fulls, but that can get a little dicey when we're reviewing contracts with homeowners. Couple other things other than that is that, are those adders going to be included in the future?
So the partial versus full is a different, little bit of a different story. Not sure if you have any other examples, but the reason that is, just quick history lesson. At one point in time, Mosaic didn't allow full re-roofs. They only allowed roof work under the array. And so to make sure we didn't get any hot water when submitting the contract and then for counter approval, we only allowed partial re-roofs to be selected there when it's a Mosaic job. That's changed since. So this actually came up a week or two ago. We do have a ticket in the works to change that and make it allow full re-roof to be selected there. So hopefully that answers that one. If you have, I at the top of the call, I went through this in greater detail. Not sure if you have any other specific examples for adders that are missing, but that's kind of an outlier answer on that particular.
Yeah, attic run. I think the guy I see on Freedom's creation portal. I might be wrong about this one, but sub panels or panel relocations.
Is there ever a scenario where you would upsell one of those?
Well, I only ever put in, as you guys said before, MPU if needed. If I have if it's not obvious to me, and I'll just go over with them basically that with this old of a service panel, it's likely you might need one. If it comes back and they don't need to do that, we'll let you know.
Yeah. So not necessarily. If we'll send the recording out. I'm not sure if you heard the kind of the beginning part where I went through this, but the upgrades as listed today, with a few exceptions, I think you're fair to call out rebates and you're fair to call out attic runs. But with the other rebates, the other adders you talked about, relocations, sub panels, those are the types of adders that we would only do if we need to do them to install a job. So the upgrades listed there in the Freedom Project Generator on the upgrades page are only those upgrades that you would need to upsell. You wouldn't ever upsell an MPU relocation. You would just do an MPU, and then if we need a relocation, we would do it. So that's why it's not on there. That's the thinking behind it. Again, that page isn't used to price a project today, which is why all adders aren't listed there. It's only ones that reps might want to upsell.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But I should definitely be pricing in for a service panel relocation if it's like very obviously going to need one if they need an upgrade. Because we get in my area, we get a lot of houses that still have the service panels well within 5 feet of the gas line. So at the very least, I should be pricing for that in if that's obvious, but not go over it, is what you're saying.
100%, but you're going to do that again in Aurora, where you're estimating the price. The project generator just conveying to Freedom, hey, here's basically what I want to put on the contract. Here's what I want to sell. Right? It's not a pricing tool at this time. We are rethinking that and reworking that, and we're there's a lot of changes coming soon to the project generator in the front end. We haven't touched the project generator in probably 3 years. And I think it's definitely due for, with some of the integrations we have today and just the process, it's definitely due for a revamp. But as it stands today, that's not a pricing tool. That's just, hey, here's what I want to sell. Here's the upgrades that I want to sell to the customer.
Okay, we're getting close to the end time here. And again, if we weren't able to get to your questions, we apologize, but please send an email to producteducation@freedomforever with any feedback or questions that we didn't get to. And with the last minute or so here, we're just going to preview a couple of the upcoming webinars we have